Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. You may recall that recently I ran a video talking about World of Deuslair, a new Kickstarter campaign from Archon Studio, the company behind Dungeons & Lasers Terrain and the superb Masters of the Universe Battleground game. With World of Deuslair, Archon Studio are expanding their range of fantasy terrain and hard plastic miniatures. And they are going one step further, creating a complete D&D 5th edition compatible role-playing experience. The full scope of the campaign comprises over 400 miniatures, a campaign world and a complete bestiary, and as of the 11th of April 2023, the campaign is live. Today's video is sponsored by Archon Studio, and we are going to take a quick look at exactly what the campaign entails, what the pledge levels are, and then at the very end I have a special painting guide showing a quick and easy way to get some colour on one of Archon Studio's most impressive miniatures to date. And I use the word miniature quite loosely. First though, let's look closer at the Deuslair campaign. As I said, it's already live, and it's going to be running for 15 days. I'm going to put a link in the video description below so you can hop straight over and check it out for yourself, but here's the news in brief. The heart of the campaign is the World of Deuslair core set, 99 miniatures in total, including some multi-part kits that let you create miniatures with different weapons and poses. However, if you've ever been involved in a Dungeons & Lasers campaign before, you will know that the core set is just the beginning. The project also includes multiple add-on sets, each containing new miniatures to help you create unique encounters in Deuslair. Of Sea and Thunder lets you explore the flying islands of the Skaregard archipelago. Armies of Deuslair lets you build legions of warriors drawn from the races of Deuslair. The White Eyes Dunes features monstrous foes from the desert, and the Beastkin Revolution contains multi-part kits to create playable characters from all of the unique Deuslair races. There's also hardback editions of the RPG campaign and bestiary, and a chance to pick up kits from previous Dungeons & Lasers campaigns you may have missed out on. And even then, that's not all. There's an early bird incentive in the form of an owlbear with her cubs, available to anyone who backs in the first 48 hours. There's a special miniature which is free to returning Dungeons & Lasers backers and which is available to everyone as a paid add-on. There are community stretch goals, regular stretch goals that Archon Studio have promised will feature many classic RPG monsters, and then there are super stretch goals. Don't know what super stretch goals are? Imagine a regular stretch goal and then scale it up. We're talking buildings, giants, vehicles, dragons, grand centerpieces for your epic encounters in the World of Deuslair. With so many options, you may find you have a wish list as long as your arm, but there are 5 different pledge levels to start with, all of which are fully customizable with add-on selections. The novice offering comes in at €89, excluding the postage, which is paid for separately in the pledge manager after the campaign. It comprises the core set, one add-on of your choice, PDFs of the campaign book and bestiary, and all of the regular stretch goals. The Apprentice pledge is €148 and includes the core set, one add-on of your choice, the PDFs, the regular stretch goals, and the super stretch goals. The Adept level is €189. It's the same as the Apprentice level, except you get to pick 3 add-ons of your choice. The Acolyte level is €269, and it's the same again except you get to pick 6 add-ons of your choice. Finally, there is the Game Master pledge, which is €369. You get the core set, 9 add-ons of your choice, the PDFs, the regular stretch goals, the super stretch goals, and then either the Tarrasque or one more add-on of your choice. And let me tell you, the Tarrasque is something a bit special. It is absolutely huge, pushing the definition of miniature to the very limits. And until now it was only available as a backer incentive from the Dungeons & Lasers Encounters crowdfunding campaign. A Tarrasque is a legendary creature from Dungeons & Dragons, not the kind of thing you would run into every day. It's something your heroes would have to be working up to over an incredibly long campaign before they could ever hope to defeat one in combat. However, this is the sort of monstrous entity that fires my imagination to create scenes that go beyond combat. I could see myself dropping a Tarrasque into an adventure not to fight with the heroes, but to put them on edge and make them realise they are up against something they just aren't ready for. I'm thinking a situation where they have to flee for their lives as the lumbering brute brings a castle crashing down around them, or a series of puzzles where they have to use their brains where brawn is of little use. This thing isn't a boss fight, it's a ticking time bomb, thundering through the town, putting the heroes under time pressure as they try to evacuate the citizens or struggle to complete a series of tasks. Maybe one day, way in the future, this is a fight that can be won with a magical sword and a ridiculously powerful spell, but that's far less interesting to me than the hopeless horror of being stalked by a beast the heroes cannot hope to destroy. That's the kind of thing that as a dungeon master I want to introduce into my own campaigns. But a miniature like the Tarrasque isn't necessarily just intimidating for your players, it can be intimidating for a dungeon master who wants to get it painted for the tabletop. Something of this size and stature could be a daunting project for anyone who is only a casual painter. Indeed, this is the kind of miniature that pro painters may well tackle with an airbrush and some very fancy techniques. But that's not how we roll here on Always Bored Never Boring. I don't even own an airbrush. While I consider myself reasonably competent with a paintbrush and basic painting techniques, my aim is always to find quick and easy ways to get something ready for the tabletop looking halfway decent. And that's what I'm going to do here with this Tarrasque today. As you can see, I have started by undercoating the model with Chaos Black. To do this I used a can of Citadel spray, and that black base coat is going to do a lot of work for us. It's going to help set the tone of the miniature, it's going to help the paint adhere to the miniature, and because I'm going to be doing a lot of dry brushing today, it's also going to do a lot of the shading for me. So let's start with the rock all over the Tarrasque's back. I'm going to use Steel Legion Drab, and I'm going to do an overbrush, which I sometimes call a wet brush because it's like a dry brush but with more paint. You load up the brush, wipe a lot of the paint back off, and then whip the brush over the miniature. In this way you will paint all of the large raised surfaces, but you will leave black in all of the recesses. This is a really quick way to paint large areas of textured surfaces. I use it for terrain all the time. With that done, you can see we've already made all those amazing details and textures in the rocks pop. We're actually halfway there, and the next step is optional. I'm going to get some Agrax Earthshade, which is liquid talent for lazy painters, and I'm going to paint this into all the recesses of the rocks. I'm not being too fussy about it, just sloshing it into the gaps to create more shading and definition. If a bit gets over the rocks, that's fine, it's just going to add variation in tone. Next we're going to use some Zandri Dust, which I think is one of my favourite Citadel paints at the moment. And this time we are doing a dry brush. So we load the brush up with our paint and then wipe most of the paint back off on a piece of kitchen paper. Then we're going to move the brush rapidly over the rocks, and this is going to pick out all those details with a fine dusting of paint. I like to use circular motions on large areas, and then I go against the grain of the details in smaller spaces that are a little harder to reach. And we're just going to build up that colour until we are happy with what we have, or we're a bit bored of dry brushing, whichever comes first. And depending on your tolerance for dry brushing, you can either leave it there, or you can do what I'm going to do and grab some Screaming Skull for one final dry brush on the most prominent details as a final highlight. This is optional, but I think it adds that final touch necessary to bring the miniature to life. Now we need to move on to the skin. I wasn't sure how to do this. The official Archon Studio colour scheme for this miniature is a bright fiery orange red, but I was going to go for a more natural skin tone. Then my little boy asked me if I would paint the skin to look like lava, so lava it is. Couldn't have said something easy, could he? To get started on the skin we have to do the most arduous part of the painting process. We need to lay down a thin coat of a pale colour over the skin areas. You could use white for this, but I used Pallid Witch Flesh, which has a slightly pinkish off-white tone. I am thinning this paint quite a lot because I want it to run into all of the recesses to make quite strong white areas, while the raised surfaces remain darker. The reason for this is because when you paint something hot like lava, you are effectively working in reverse. Your recesses should be brighter than the raised areas. With the white or off-white dry, we can start building up our colour, and I'm going to start with a wash of Cassandora Yellow. I want to keep this coat really thin, but this is going to go over all of the white base colour to tint it. We want to avoid it going on the rocks too much, but a little isn't going to hurt, and we do want to get it around the areas where the skin meets the rock. After that we have another optional step, this time using some Fugan Orange shade, and what I'm going to do here is apply it to the raised areas of the muscles. If a bit runs into some of the recesses, that's fine, this is a living creature and will have natural variances in its skin, but as much as possible I want the orange wash on those raised details only. It's a bit time consuming, so you can definitely give it a miss if you want. Then it's back to dry brushing, and as I mentioned before, we want to work up to darker colours, so I'm starting with a Fire Dragon Bright dry brush. We want to go all over the skin areas. As before, it doesn't matter if a little gets on the rocks, but we do want to avoid that as much as possible. Then we switch to Evil Sun's Scarlet for a dry brush of that, and we are going to slightly focus our dry brushing a bit more with each stage, so we are leaving some of the previous layers visible underneath. Then we switch to Mephiston Red, which is a very nice rich red colour, and we do another dry brush. You can pretty much keep going with this as long as you want, but once you are happy you have gone red enough, there is one last thing you need to do to finish off the skin. Grab some ABNB black and do a targeted dry brush on the most raised surfaces. It may sound odd, but that touch of black on the very top would be where the lava is cooling, and the darkness of it helps the yellow in the recesses to really glow. And that's going to do it for me. Next we need to do a bit more real painting, starting with inside the Tarrasque's mouth. Bugman's Glow is a really good colour for tongues, so we're going to use that. One coat over the tongue and the interior of the mouth should do it. And then, just to bring back the definition of the sculpt, I'm going to grab some Reikland Flesh Shade and do a wash of that. You can go back and do highlighting on the tongue if you want to, but I don't really see the need. Then we are going to do the claws and the teeth. They are all being done the same way using a technique I employ frequently for horns. We start with Zandri dust and we do a coat of that over the claws. One coat should be enough as long as you are completely covering the black underneath. When that's completely dry, we're going to use 3 different washes. First we are going to use Seraphim Sepia, and we are going to cover all of the claws. Once that is completely dry, we are switching to Reikland Flesh Shade, and depending on the look you want, you can paint this halfway down each claw, either from the tip or the root. I have gone from the root because there is some nice detailing the darker shades will help to emphasise. Once that's dry, we are switching to Agrak's Earthshade, and we are going to paint this over a quarter of the claw, starting at whichever end you started with the Reikland Flesh Shade, so in my case that's the root. And once that's dry you can do some highlighting if you want to, but I'm not going to as I am going for quick here. Those heroes aren't going to trample themselves, are they? With the claws done, I neatened up the base around the feet with some ABNB black, ready for the final stages. Painting the base is incredibly easy. We're going to do an overbrush like we did with the rock on the Tarrasque, but this time we are using Mechanicus Standard Grey. So, as before, we are whipping the brush over the details, leaving all the black paint in the recesses. Then we are going to do a heavy dry brush with Celestra Grey. This is so much brighter than the Mechanicus Standard Grey, so you get quite a stark contrast. If you don't like that so much, work up the highlights through progressively lighter greys instead. And then, as a final highlight, I'm using some Ulthuan Grey. This will just go over the most exposed raised parts. That will finish the base, although if you want to, you could add some effects to reflect the heat and the glow coming off the Tarrasque's feet. Just get an old brush and build up some orange and red over the rock surface with a stippling effect. I'm not going to do that though. All I'm going to do is line the eyes with ABNB black, dot the pupils with pallid witch flesh, and call this done. I won't lie and say this was half an hour's work, but this was still incredibly quick for a project of this size. Actual time with brush in hand was probably around 3 hours, with the most long-winded part being getting the first coat of colour on the skin. Considering there are several steps that I consider optional, that's pretty good going for a gigantic monster. And while you are never going to win any awards with something like this, I think it looks pretty decent. It should be suitably impressive when you drop it in front of your players at the next games night, and it shows there really isn't anything you can't paint as long as you have a big enough dry brush. Remember, if you want a Tarrasque of your own, it is available as a paid add-on in the new World of Deuslair Kickstarter campaign, which also has you covered for unique enemies and player characters, classic RPG creatures, terrain, neoprene gaming mats, a new campaign setting and a bestiary. The link is in the video description so you can see for yourself. Whatever you need for your next adventure, there's sure to be something there of interest, so do please consider stopping by to see for yourself. And that is it from me for now. Thank you to Archon Studio for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone, bye bye.